Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hacking with Friends. Today is a very special 1-year friendship anniversary episode with my good friend James, who I met about 1 year ago at the C3 Hacking Conference. James, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So to kick off our friendship celebration, can you tell the audience a little bit about what the C3 conference is?
Well, it's a big collection of strange nerds that like cybersecurity, and they sit around for a couple days and drink some club mate and do some strange things, and then they all go home for a year.
And then try to quench their club mate addictions in their various countries and find out that it's quite expensive to do so. Yes, and for me, this was the first time that I had gone to a security conference in Europe. And I basically was just showing up my friend Stefan that was complaining about how hard it would be to go to DEF CON and how it wouldn't be possible. So I decided to really stick it to him by spending like maybe $5,000 to fly to Germany and go to the security conference where I happened to meet James. James, how did you end up going to C3? What brought you all the way there?
I actually originally met Jonty Satanic several years ago, at least probably 3 or 4 now. And then through there, I met Stefan, and I've been interacting with him and his community on Discord ever since, and I came along with them, basically.
So was that your first hacking conference?
Yeah.
What was your overall impression?
Well, I mean, when's the next one? But there's coronavirus.
Would you recommend it for someone who wants to get into hacking to kind of like learn about the culture, or would you say that you can learn about hacker culture just as well from a distance?
I mean, you can learn a lot about hacking anywhere you are, but absolutely being able to like meet all these cool people that are just there right with you, it's really interesting.
Was there a particular memorable moment you'll take away from the hacker conference in Europe?
Yeah, the sugar girl.
Oh my gosh.
That probably wasn't what you're looking for.
No, that's okay. So part of the reason James and I met each other was we were working together in a team of hackers, of which our friend Stefan is one, that made this really interesting game called the Bill Badge, which was a little soldering badge you could put together that was able to interact with other badges of the same type and basically change their colors. And the game was on the surface that you were supposed to change all the other badges to your team's color, but there was also a hidden game inside. It was all very cool, but there was also this girl who became very interested in the game and kept coming up to us and trying to sell us sugar, which she repeatedly showed us was actually packets of sugar, but was very shady and suspicious about it. So over time, we all grew to fear the sugar girl, and it became this thing where we would turn around and she would always be there. So just know, one of the risks of going to a security conference is sometimes you get one of those sugar girls. So be careful. But overall, the conference was, for me, a reminder that things are very different in Europe, especially when it comes to conferences. This was chaotic and had lots of things I had never seen, even at conferences that are pretty wild, like DEF CON. So I got to do my first talk there, where I had never done a talk at a conference before, and I was encouraged to basically edit the wiki myself, edit myself in, and run my own class without any official permission. Whereas a lot of other conferences I've been to, there's always an organizer you have to talk to. This was very much like, figure it out. If you want to do it, just go ahead and do it. So it was a very intense experience for me. I got to watch James hack one of the main signs, or one of the main projections, like on the wall with our logo for the majority of the conference, which was super cool. And we all got to kind of earn our stripes in our own way amongst our little hacker group. So, little shout out to C3. I'm very sad that I wasn't able to go in person this year. Of course, no one was. But yeah, it was a very, very cool conference. And if you ever get a chance to check it out, you definitely should. So today we have a topic to talk about aside from the C3 conference, which we could do an entire live stream about. And that is a topic that James came up with. So James, what are you going to teach us about today, and why might someone be interested in it?
So we're going to be talking about the Whonix operating system, which is a tool for kind of anonymization through the Tor network. It has a particularly good application in, what would you call it, privacy by compartmentalization, if you use it in separate ways. But there's lots of different ways you can use it to maintain your privacy on the internet. or anonymity.
So has Dr. Seuss written other operating systems, or is this his only one?
Hilarious.
Thank you. I had to sneak in that one dad joke. But realistically, though, Whonix is really well known by people that might be a little bit paranoid or want to install an operating system that gives them more control over their privacy. And there are a lot of options out there. So why would someone who is concerned about their privacy or wants, maybe a Linux operating system pick this over something like maybe, I don't know, like Ubuntu or something that's easier for beginners to get started with? Or maybe something really hard like Arch?
So Whonix's application is a little bit different than those other operating systems because it's designed to be virtualized such that you can kind of enclose applications and your activities inside of it, and you can keep that to itself. So everything you do inside a Whonix virtual machine is routed through the Tor network. So you cannot, unless you really mess with it, you can't kind of mess up and leak your personal information.
So is this then kind of friendly for people who might get into an operating system that leaks a lot of stuff, try to set up a privacy system and then miss something and end up messing it all up? This would be like a solution where they could just unbox it, set it up, and then not have to worry about making a mistake that undoes all the work they've tried to do.
Yeah, that's certainly one way to look at it, but also for more advanced users, you can use implementations in Qubes OS, which is a hypervisor that you run directly on your machine to compartmentalize all your activities and maintain really solid privacy.
Cool. Okay. So if you want to get started with this, you said it's designed to be virtualized. What would somebody need to actually use this themselves if they wanted to follow along, for example?
So if you're on Windows, Oracle Virtual Box is a good tool to use.
Yep, I myself use VirtualBox. I also use Parallels because they gave it to me for free, but as I say constantly on the stream, it should be made free for students, so I currently still recommend VirtualBox. That being said, if you have it for free, then Parallels is nice. But VirtualBox is cross-platform, so you can use this on any operating system, and it's generally what we recommend people get started with if they want to try out these virtualized systems. So, okay, do we want to get started taking a look at it, or do we want to talk more about who this might be useful for or what you can do with it?
We can start by loading up a VM, and then we can kind of showcase a little bit of what you can do if that works for you.
Cool. All right, let's switch over to your screen, and then let's get started.
Right. So if I'm good to go, so you can see here, I've already downloaded the Whonix. I don't know what you want to call it, but the
ISO.
Yeah, the image. Sort of. It's sort of a thing that you can directly import into VirtualBox or similar applications.
I can't quite see it. What's the extension? Is it like VBS or something?
OVA.
OVA. Okay, so an OVA is then like a completely frozen virtual like system with all the settings as well. So rather than having to spin up just like a disk image, this is like a disk image that's already like configured after it's been installed. So the OVA file is much larger than an ISO file, but it's also pre-configured. So the trade-off is like disk space versus like the ability to actually like make sure all the configuration settings are right. Oh, and also try to make your windows a little bit bigger just so people can see them if possible. Okay.
I don't know how I can make things bigger, but
maybe like icon size. Yeah. Okay. That's yeah. Whatever you sure.
I don't know. I'm just scrolling in, but yeah. So this is the beauty of this kind of system, is that it's actually really easy to spin up a new VM, which is kind of the whole idea, is that you can spin up new ones and throw them away and that sort of thing. So if we just load up a new one here and hit next, import it.
And those are all the settings that you would usually need to like manually set when you were like dragging up an ISO, I believe.
Yeah, and you can modify these if you want to add more resources, but I think it runs fine as it's set up in here.
Yeah.
So you have a couple of agreements to go through, which is basically just licensing stuff, and then tells you when you might when you might want to modify the settings.
Got it.
And it's going to take a second to import because
cool.
It's pretty big. But
how large is that OVA file or whatever it was?
The OVA file is 2 GB, I think.
Oh, that's actually quite small. I think
Yeah.
Kali Linux and like Black Arch are massive. They're like 20 something gigabytes. So that's pretty good.
It failed.
It failed. Of course it did.
Yes.
Do you already have one open?
I have one that's already set up, but that's set up slightly differently. So I'll try it one more time and hope it works.
I wonder why it failed. Did it fail again?
I don't think so.
Okay, good.
Not yet. I'm gonna change the directory just in case that was the issue. It's probably because I already have other virtual machines that I removed from VirtualBox before recording, so maybe something's...
The number one reason why I tell people to install an operating system on like the hard disk, if they're going to be using it consistently, like, you know, Ubuntu or something like that, is that VirtualBox is a nightmare and things constantly break that are confusing to beginners. So I found that the only thing I didn't like about it was that when there was a problem, it was random, intermittent, and like sometimes was really difficult to trace. So just my 2 cents.
I mean, I personally, when I use Whonix, I usually use Qubes because that's a really nice experience, but that's a whole other tangent to go into.
Looks like it's getting close. It's very suspenseful, wondering if your
Seriously,
operating system is going to fail.
100%, but not really.
Yeah, no, well, good for it. It's 100% done. It's not going to let you do anything, but it's 100%
No,
done.
absolutely not. Okay, there we go. It worked.
Cool. All right, so the number one piece of advice we can give people so far is run it twice. Doesn't work, try it again. Change anything? No.
I mean, what I did there is I moved where it was actually putting the files because I think I already have ones by probably the same name where it was trying to put them, and I had removed them from VirtualBox, so it wasn't as crowded. So the first one we're going to launch, it imports 2 virtual machines from this, the gateway and the workstation. And the first one we're going to launch is the gateway, which is where all the traffic is going to go from your workstation virtual machine.
Got it. So this is 2 images. One of them is acting to like take over your traffic and make sure it's routed correctly, and the second one is just connecting to that, so that there's no direct connection between the workstation and the host computer. Is that what we're trying to do?
Sort of. And the main thing is that the gateway actually kind of handles all the routing through the Tor network. Mm-hmm. So you're not trusting the host machine to do that.
Right. Okay, cool. So like you're doing your networking virtually rather than letting it touch the host before it's encrypted.
Yes.
Cool.
I think.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it's going to take a second to load up, which I think is just creating first time setup stuff.
And what exactly is it going to be doing?
So it's creating swap files for the operating system, and then it's going to start, and we're going to get a desktop environment when that happens, and that's going to then prompt us to do some stuff with the Tor network. So asking if we want to configure a bridge. So if, for example, you don't trust your ISP, you may want to use a bridge, or if you're in a country that restricts Tor usage. This actually takes us into an interesting thing. So a lot of people will say, use a VPN when you're using Tor, which is actually a pretty bad idea, because you're kind of, or it depends. It depends who you trust more, because you need to understand that in most of the situations, what you're doing there is shifting your trust from your ISP to your VPN provider, and you're adding more latency, you're increasing the attack surface. So generally it's not worth it. And in that situation, you usually want to add a bridge, which is just somebody volunteering and they don't have your personal information or your payment information rather. So here we go. So it's asking, do we want to configure it and add a bridge, or do we just want to connect? And I just want to connect because thankfully.
Right. And the bridge again would be necessary if you aren't able to normally connect to the Tor network.
Exactly. So there we go. That's finished. And now it's going to run Whonix check in a second, which is going to make sure everything's set up as it should be. And in the meantime, now we can start up the workstation.
Cool. So both need to be running at the same time. Beginner question, but I feel like someone could forget and like turn off one and then wonder why they suddenly lost their network connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Things might go slightly more smooth if you start the gateway before you start the workstation, because your networking should just work a little smoother when you're setting things up.
Cool.
I think the workstation will still run, but you might get confused because you don't have internet access, because there's nothing to actually accept your connections. But
So also, can you just, for people who haven't thought about it, can you explain why it's a bad idea to like have a Tor connection going to like a VPN you're paying for? Like what's the problem with that? Like why might that not be a good idea?
so there's two situations here. There's going through a VPN before your traffic goes through Tor, which is a reasonable suggestion in my opinion, not a very good one, but that's disputed. And then there's a setup where you would go through Tor and then through a VPN, which is a terrible thing to do, but it's harder to do that. So there's it's just something that people should be aware of, but that's absolutely terrible, because essentially you give your VPN provider, usually anyway, your payment details, and they have access to IP logs, and a lot of them claim that they don't keep those, but most of them do, if not all of them. And in a lot of situations, a government could say, okay, you're going to now keep logs on this specific person, and then in future they would, even if they didn't want to. So a lot of times they don't have the choice, because if there's a criminal investigation and you're a customer of this VPN service, then maybe you'll get logged, which I'm not saying go be a cyber criminal, but certainly it's a thing to consider about your privacy and anonymity, because it's a very easy way to de-anonymize you if somebody has your payment information.
Right, and I feel like some people get tempted into doing that because when you're using Tor, you constantly get asked to fill out CAPTCHAs and get banned from websites and stuff, because Tor traffic is just assumed to be malicious by a lot of different services and they just don't want to deal with it. So some people might be tempted to try to bridge their traffic back into a network that doesn't get blacklisted, and that's where you could also be subjected to de-anonymization and somebody actually starting to log what you're doing.
Absolutely, and we can talk about that a bit more later, because I have another machine set up that talks about that problem. But so we're set up now. Everything should be working. So if we start the web browser up here, maybe it's thinking about it. Considering. Okay, so this is just I think it's just a normal Tor browser. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I'm not exactly sure. But it runs through the connection that's managed by the gateway. And if we go to the IP check section on here, we can see we're configured to use Tor. Very nice.
Interesting. Hey, could you go to a link for me?
Which link?
Can you go to crimes, CRIMES.gay? Just want to see if it'll...
Is the site you own?
Oh, why would you think that? Try going to www.crimes.gay. Looks like it didn't work. It looks like... Oh, are you blocking all JavaScript? That could also...
No.
That could also do the thing.
It should be allowed in these default settings.
All right. Well, I was going to try to make you click on a tracking link, and it actually does work for me. So what I think... Oh, actually, let me try refreshing it. I want to see if I can see on your system what it looks like.
Let me reset the identity. Maybe that'll...
Let's see.
It does go through a canary tokens page before it redirects.
Okay, then maybe I got it. Let me take a look. So if we want to go to... let's go to my screen for a second. We can see that there's a couple different hits here, and they appear to come from different places. I'm using a VPN as well, so it's interesting to see like what. Oh, okay. Well, that one's obviously me because it's a Mac. But here's what it looks like. So we see that this is coming from, let's see, San Jose, California. It is a Tor Exit Node, so we can see that. And then also I can see that it is a Linux system that you're running Firefox. I can see the platform is Linux x86-64. I can see the Gecko version. So I can see like a little bit of information about you, but really like not that much, which is interesting. So again, I am able to determine that this is a known Tor exit node. So, this is, when I visited this page, it came up as false. It said, hey, like this is not actually, a Tor node. You can reasonably assume that this person is using their real IP address. Of course, that's not true. I'm using a VPN, but at least it's not Tor. For this, it is a Tor exit node. So I know that this location in San Jose is garbage, but it is interesting to see what kind of information I can pull about your machine just by having you click on a tracking link. So thank you for clicking on that. That was very interesting. And you can kind of see like what this looks like now that everything is being routed through Tor and through your system, because you are not, in fact, in San Jose, California.
Absolutely not. Very far away.
Yeah, and it does give me some pretty confusing information because I don't really know which Linux system you're using at all. It doesn't identify itself. On mine, I can see that it's a Mac OS system, and in fact, with the appropriate either Canary token or using our friend Joel's, Grabify links, we can see even the specific version of Mac OS I'm running or the specific MacBook Pro I have by looking at the GPU version that's installed. So you can really pull a lot of data, but this is being not as verbose, and it's not giving me as much to work with. So I really don't know what kind of Linux system this is, because the user agent is, very, very nondescript about what's going on here. It's very minimal.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, we can switch back.
Okay, so before we go into anything too detailed, one thing I just want to showcase is kind of, again, how it protects your IP address. So this is a VPN IP, so I'm not exposing my own IP, but I just minimized everything. Give me a second. Right, so if I refresh this, you can see my VPN IP. And if we were to take this link,
can you make the text a little bit larger? Sorry. Cool. Right, I can see it now.
Yeah. So if we were to go into here and go to the same link, you can see we get a Tor node. But the interesting thing is that all this traffic is actually, because normally, you run the Tor browser and only that traffic is run through Tor. But in this situation, we could actually go into our console and we could curl the same API and we'll get a Tor IP. Sorry, I don't know if you can see that very well.
Can you control +++ or whatever? Command +++? Whichever +++.
Hold
no.
On. I'm gonna control. Oh, that's the wrong.
You made it smaller. Okay, there you go.
Look, the keybinds aren't working. That's probably because of virtualization, and I don't have all the tools set up.
Okay, cool. I can see it now. Awesome.
Yeah. So there's that IP, and the other thing you'll notice is that this is actually on a different Tor circuit. So we have a different exit node.
Interesting. So why is that? Is that just because different applications might get different exit nodes or something like that?
Yeah, they're processed separately, which is another interesting thing. So all your activity can't be connected to fingerprint you or identify you.
So do you know how that works? Is it per application, or how is the traffic broken up?
Well, it's probably per application, sort of. But again, if I do the same command again, I'll probably get a different circuit.
Interesting. So it's just like constantly rotating them as well.
Yeah, I mean, it won't break your continuity if you're inside of a program. So like if I refresh this over here, I'll get the same circuit. But if I were to then close out Tor and reopen it, I would probably get a different, is my understanding.
That's super cool. Okay, so that gives you an extra layer of protection against you just messing up by constantly working in the background to proactively change this out and make sure that there's nothing that could be tied to your activity. And breaking it up by application is also super smart and cool. And it's nice that it adds some continuity as well, so that it's not constantly changing and confusing you if you're trying to use a single application and like the IP address is just like flying around all crazy.
Yeah, so the other kind of benefit to this is that if you want to use applications and have that traffic routed through the Tor network, this is one of the best ways to do this. You could also use kind of Tails OS, which is it's not designed for virtualization like Whonix is. So in my opinion, it's a bit harder to use, but it aims for the same sort of thing. So what this means is that, it doesn't just mean you can do a curl command to an API. Some of the applications that come installed on Whonix are Bitcoin wallets and, more interestingly, a Monero wallet. So you can actually connect to the Monero network or host a node through the Tor network. So that's complete anonymization in that regard, or as
That's
close
it's very clever. I like that. And it's also very minimal. It seems like there's not a lot of commitment to get it set up. Provided you have enough space and resources on your computer, you can just run this, and it piggybacks off your internet connection. But also, I mean, aside from putting out obviously encrypted Tor traffic on your network, which somebody might notice and not like, it does allow you to be able to, evade your internet service provider or anybody else who might be logging your traffic in order to do things that you might want to keep to yourself.
Absolutely. So, do you want to talk about the thing you alluded to earlier with being blocked by, being blocked, Tor exit nodes being blocked, rather, or do you have something else you want to go through before that?
No, I think that would be a great thing to touch on, because the one problem with this is, I mean, if you try to go to any like reasonable website, that like try to do a Google search, for example, in Firefox and see what happens, and you can kind of illustrate this problem.
This depends obviously on the exit node that you're using, depends on how many other people have been using it and what they've been doing on it. So I actually was doing some testing before the stream, and a lot of the times Google actually ran fine, which was a big surprise to me.
Yeah.
But there are lots of sites, especially smaller ones these days, because bigger ones are kind of catching some flack a little bit more and more for blocking Tor outright. But a lot of smaller sites that we won't point out because they're probably extremely obscure will kind of block Tor or restrict your experience. So one of the bigger ones that still do block Tor is actually Nike.com.
Really? I didn't know that.
So if you go there, it will just outright deny you. But I have an interesting thing to showcase. So one of the other things that we can talk about while we're doing this is that you can have multiple workstation Whonix machines off of the same gateway. So if I open up my other workstation over here, it's going to connect to this gateway. And we'll just give this a second to start. But one of the ways that you can solve this problem, and you need to be aware of the implications, the privacy implications of it, because there are ways that you can be de-anonymized through this method. But one of the things that you can do is you can sort of set up an anonymous proxy sort of by a VPS with crypto or some other way that you can't be identified. And then you can host your own proxy on there, and you can run your traffic through Tor, then through your anonymous proxy that you made when nobody has your personal information. So you would register on a site like 1984 hosting or something like that, for example, where they don't require any of your personal information. So then you're in a situation where you're trustless because you established that VPS through Tor, and you can use a terminal over Tor to manage it, which is a little slow, but it works. And that's not what I've done for this video because it's a pain just for an example. But this is set up to do that. So what's going to happen is our traffic is going to go through Tor, then through this proxy that could be created anonymously. This isn't, but it's sort of hiding the exit node. So the potential attack vector that this opens is that if somebody's watching that proxies traffic and what's going in and out of there, they could identify your activity and maybe eventually fingerprint you. But generally, if you isolate your activities and you're careful, it's a way to get around these sort of blocks that we've mentioned.
So then the situation is you have your own VPS that you are not tied to, via credit card or something. That is whitelisting all of your traffic that's going through the Tor network to evade your internet service provider. So you're sidestepping a VPN that potentially could be logging the traffic that gets decrypted as soon as it comes through the Tor network and sent out over the normal internet by basically being your own VPN and just making sure that you're not logging by just deleting your own logs, right?
Well, sort of, but it also doesn't really matter if they have logs, if they have no idea who you are, and they never had your real IP to begin with, or any of your personal information, which is that's the crucial thing here. You can't just like roll up and buy a VPS with your credit card and think that you're going to be a-okay, because you wouldn't be.
Yeah.
So I think this froze up, which is probably just Virtual Box. I'm going to restart this quickly. But
are there any ways that you could be fingerprinted or caught while using this method?
Absolutely. So because all your traffic is going through this one proxy, you lose this kind of layer of anonymity that you get with Tor, which is where you're moving between different exit nodes when you're doing different things. So although your circuit may change, you're going to end up going through the same node at the end of it, which means that eventually somebody could build up a profile of your activity, which can be used in various ways.
Interesting. So then, yeah, the downside of this is you're creating another choke point with the VPS. And also, is there any potential for the VPS provider to start logging or to start focusing on what you're doing on their servers? Because, I mean, fundamentally, when you have a VPS, you're running on someone else's physical hardware, and they have obviously physical root access to that hardware.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility. It seems unlikely, given that they wouldn't know any of your information. It's certainly possible, and it's something to be aware of. But the idea is that if you're managing it carefully enough, that possibility shouldn't matter any more than the possibility of being fingerprinted.
Yeah, so this also reminds me of, like, have you kept up with the recent SolarWinds hack and what happened there?
Yeah.
So some of what the attackers did is they were able to route traffic by compromising or finding other domains that were valid or looked valid and then sending traffic in that way. So they were basically whitelisting their sketchy traffic, which then when you unturn that point of traffic, it was just going out to the Tor network. And it was very difficult to determine who was behind that. And they were also very careful to basically hack enough domains or stand up enough domains that they only had one per target. So they weren't landing in that problem like you mentioned, where someone would be able to just pop one target, look at all the activity going in or out of it, and then figure out all the different campaigns that were going on. So it's kind of interesting that even this kind of privacy-based stuff, links back to some of the standard methodology that really advanced attackers are using to pull off some of these big attacks. So this kind of anonymization, it's necessary to, for example, whitelist your traffic before, logging into all sorts of things to avoid flagging yourself for, needing to do captchas constantly or, getting caught if you're an attacker. So this kind of, this level of network obfuscation is very typical for anybody who's serious about cybersecurity or, doing some sort of cybersecurity related operation. So I just think it's interesting how there's parallels in the more recent breach.
Yeah. So talking about that, if you want, as you kind of briefly hinted when you were relating it to the recent SolarWinds hack, if you want to kind of stay anonymous and not get fingerprinted or, be as protected as you reasonably can from that possibility, you would, for example, say we want to go to Nike.com, we would ideally only use this to go to Nike.com, because then we're not kind of saying, oh, this person uses this website and this one and this one and this one, which then could potentially form a profile on you. But as you can see, I mean, this is a German VPS right now, so we're getting German Nike, but we can't actually get into, we don't get this error. And
could you, so we'll blur the actual IP address so you don't have to burn your VPS, but could you try going to...
I made a disposable one for this.
Okay, cool. Could you try going to the same tracking link and I just want to see if it flags it as a Tor node, because you are still going through Tor. It just should be masking it now, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't actually put all the anonymization or proxy settings on this. That it may get flagged, basically. But
okay, so let's go ahead and switch to my screen. And this is kind of crazy. It just says that it's not a Tor node, and then the user agent is just Windows NT. But it doesn't like tell me anything else. It doesn't like guess the region it's in. It's just like, well, it's not Tor. That's all I know. I think that it must have been blocking some of the aspects of the JavaScript that are trying to collect information. So this one, not revealing much at all. Like it's really not telling me anything about who clicked on this other than that it was not a known Tor exit node, which means that, this shouldn't be blocked, but I'm also not getting practically no information about the person who clicked on this link.
yeah, so obviously this approach doesn't fix everything because certain websites will block VPNs, proxies, and Tor altogether by just saying, okay, this is a data center IP, no, or something like that. But generally, this is like the kind of easiest way to achieve this behavior through what I found. So this approach, there's several different ways to do this. If I used like the console or something right now, it would still just go through Tor. It wouldn't route it all through the proxy, which is, for this situation, in my opinion, probably desirable. But there are other approaches that you can use. They're actually really well documented, as well as the implications of each one on the Whonix website. So that's a really good resource. But this is by far the easiest one that I found to do. So I just edited the settings within Tor here. But because we have the kind of gateway system, it's still routing my traffic through Tor.
That's super cool. So this seems like a very, very easy thing to set up for somebody who, I mean, maybe not the VPS part, but the rest of just setting up Whonix seems like a very easy thing for someone who just wants to set this up, but maybe isn't a Linux expert that's going to get through like an Arch install, right?
Exactly. Like you don't really need, I mean, much Linux knowledge at all, because if you're just trying to kind of browse Tor as you normally would, this is a much safer option already than just using Tor on Windows. So it keeps everything isolated within the virtual machine, which is one of the main features.
That's super cool. I think that we're getting kind of close on time. I guess we have like, we're at like 45 minutes or so. So if we want to wrap up, what would you recommend people do once they get this set up? Like, what would the next step of using this be? I mean, would you just go ahead and just dive in and start using it? Or are there other things you can do to make this even better or make it more useful for doing other things?
So if you're going with the kind of privacy by compartmentalization strategy, you need to be careful about not mixing your identities between each other. And this kind of setup encourages that, because you think, okay, this is this VM, I'm going to use it for this exactly. And it also helps you do that. So there's a password manager in Whonix already. You don't have to install it or anything. It's already there. And that just stores your passwords locally. So it's not like the most robust system, but if you just want to whack some passwords down, you can just generate them, store them, and create a kind of identity for whatever you want to do. And you should maintain privacy, especially if you're not using the proxies or anything like that.
And it sounds like also if you want to burn that identity, you can just get rid of that Linux virtual machine and suddenly, everything that was associated with those accounts is gone. So yeah. If an account is logging your IP, if it gets compromised, then still there's very, very little to tie it, because if you're generating passwords locally, so the password's not tied to any other account, you're creating whatever accounts you need on that one system. And then, once you abandon that system, you don't touch them again. There should be no information to lead back to you, because, you've really gone to pretty great lengths to make sure all that stuff is disconnected from any other activity you're going to be doing.
It's one of the safest setups that you can have. It's the sort of stuff that Snowden would use if he wanted to stay kind of private. He has actually publicly stated that he uses Qubes with Whonix on a daily basis. So that gives you an idea of kind of the level of security and privacy that you're looking at here.
So another thing that we talked about, and I think you were recommending that I try this on my ThinkPad, was Qubes OS. Can you tell me a little bit about what the difference is between this and that?
So Qubes OS is just a more convenient way to use Whonix, because sorry, my cat is attacking me. Not really. But whereas kind of here we're just using VirtualBox, you can use Qubes, which is a hypervisor. So you get much better performance, and it's much easier to kind of just spin up a VM and just get rid of it. Like, there are specific settings in Qubes that you can use to just say, you hit 2 buttons and you have a disposable Whonix VM. You browse Tor or whatever, you close it, and then it's deleted. It's gone forever. And it's just that easy. So that's a really kind of nice setup, and that's probably the sort of thing that super paranoid people like me would use.
Oh, also, we had a note from our producer, by the way, and it was just 2 words: show cat. So if your cat does jump up again, we've heard from our producer that would be an ideal thing to show.
Does that get extra points?
Yes, it does. Wow, what a butterball. I love that cat. What's its name?
Thomas.
Ah. Well, not as large as my cat Hand Banana, but still supple, a supple cat.
A supple cat.
Cool. Well, if you guys like watching this, then make sure to let us know, because we're talking about doing some other privacy-focused stuff, like maybe setting up Qubes OS and showing what people with the real tinfoil hats like to run. So if you want us to touch on that, or if you like this privacy-focused episode, then tackling some of the problems that come along with privacy, like, for example, getting hit with CAPTCHAs or not being able to buy your new Nikes. This is all stuff that pops up as soon as you start to try getting serious with your privacy. So I think it's really fun to cover this stuff, show ways of getting around those problems, and just show what it's like to actually try to control your privacy, which not a lot of people do. So if you're interested in that, let us know in the comments. And yeah, I really enjoyed how easy it was to get this set up and how disposable these virtual machines are, so that you can just kind of make sure that nothing is all put in the same bucket and you're siloing everything that you want to keep separated. I don't think I found another way of doing that, because most people just maybe install one virtual machine of like Ubuntu or something, do all their stuff there. Maybe it's Kali and they feel super secure, but everything's going through the same bucket. It's all the same virtual machine. It's all saved. And after a while, it gets pretty easy to track that if they're using it all the time.
Good stuff.
Yeah, so thank you for showing us this method of getting started with just keeping your activity private on the internet. If you have watched anything about the way like Facebook or other advertisers track you on the internet, or even seen what your own internet service provider can do with your information, then you probably care about this stuff. And if you thought that there's no real good reason to do this, then maybe you should go look at those 2 topics I just mentioned, because they are horrifying. But I think that I would love to have you back sometime to show Qubes OS and maybe some other privacy-focused stuff. And yeah, if people want to follow your work, such as the world-famous Hunator, where would they go to do so, James?
I am at JamsDev on Twitter. I'm pretty inactive, but it's there. Or I'm on GitHub. I don't remember the handle off the top of my head, but I'm on there too.
Cool. And you can see James also credited on the V3 version of Stefan's dauthor that we've made a class about, because it is so cool. He created a cross-platform serial monitor in Rust that allows you to interact with an ESP8266 microcontroller to do all sorts of cool hacker stuff. And it also has a really impressive chicken banner. So thank you for your contribution to open source projects as well, because you did that just to support the community and make that project better. So James has done some really cool work.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, well, that's all we have for this episode. If you want to check out some other great content, make sure to check out the Varonis brand channel to see our sometimes host Killian also do the threat update, which shows you guys how attacks against real companies are unfolding and what they can do to stop them. And if you have any ideas for upcoming episodes, I always love to hear them. Let me know if you like this episode, and you can follow me on Twitter at Kody Kinsey if you want to reach out and let us know about something we should cover. All right, that's it for today, and we'll see you next time. Bye.